The very latest on Hurricane Harvey, and it is still a hurricane, but it has significantly weakened from yesterday evening when it made landfall as a strong, very powerful Category 4 storm. Good news for the folks in Texas is that the storm continues to weaken. Bad news for the folks in Texas is that it is going to basically remain stationary for the next at least 5 days. We are not going to see much motion from the center of Harvey, or at that point, whatever is left of Harvey. Basically, just that center of circulation, that low pressure center, is going to exist for at least the next 5 days, maybe as we get into the end of next week and the following weekend. Let's take a look at what is happening right now with Harvey. Very latest is that the storm is inland, as I mentioned, and we're just starting to now get that daylight imagery of that high-resolution satellite. So you really can clearly see the storm structure. Still a very well-defined storm, even though it has now been inland for about 12 hours now. The storm itself is still pretty compact. In other words, what I'm trying to say is most of the convection, the storms, the rainfall, the heaviest of the rain, is still near the center. As it continues to weaken, we will likely see a lot of that rainfall begin to spread more across the northern Gulf Coast, and that's when we will likely start seeing that rainfall move into southeast Louisiana. Right now, notice the closest that you could consider some of the outer bands is from down south of Franklin and St. Mary Parish, south maybe of Morgan City, and then continuing along a line, kind of a broken line toward Lake Charles, maybe some as far inland as Lafayette. So still not exactly in our area, but over the course of the next couple of days, that rainfall will begin to move over us. Here is the latest motion. Look at that movement north at 2. Relatively speaking, it's stationary. Winds are still at 75 miles an hour, so still very strong winds. And look at the convection. We're starting to see the convection dissipate, or at least begin to weaken near the center, but you still have that big swath from around Houston toward the really kind of Louisiana-Texas state line, and then more convection still developing down in the Gulf. So even though the storm center is inland and will likely remain inland for the next several days, I'm still not certain if it's going to move back out over the water. We're not likely to see this rapidly weaken because it is still drawing a lot of moisture from the Gulf. So it's still going to maintain some of that strength as well as produce a lot of heavy rainfall. Forecast, this is the latest from the Hurricane Center, and really no major thinking. There is not going to be much motion of the storm for the next several days. Now, if you were watching me this morning during our 8 a.m. newscast, the Hurricane Center actually had this maintaining its strength as a tropical storm through about early Wednesday morning. Now, they begin to weaken this to more of a depression or perhaps even remnant low by late Sunday night and going into Monday morning. So the storm will continue to weaken. As I mentioned, though, that circulation from that low pressure center is still going to be there. So that'll still be very obvious on satellite through next week. And that motion is still going to be drawing moisture from the Gulf and producing heavy rainfall. So again, great news in that we're not looking at this thing moving toward Louisiana. Bad news is with it still circulating and that motion in the atmosphere still bringing in moisture from the Gulf over the Gulf Coast, we're still going to keep our rain chances on the higher side from Monday through Thursday. Here's what a couple of the computer models have been doing. This is the GFS model. Saturday and into Sunday, Monday, still sitting over South Texas. Again, kind of hugging near the coastline or generally moving, kind of meandering in South Texas. Now, the GFS actually keeps the system well to our west. If we go over to the European model, this model actually brings the system a little bit closer to southwest and western Louisiana. So the GFS would actually, or the Euro would indicate maybe a little bit more rainfall around us. Notice the Euro is still trying to pick up on the storm, getting lifted northward toward northern Texas and Oklahoma by Saturday morning. If you remember, at the same time on the GFS model, it kind of has it dissipating over South Texas or perhaps even northern Mexico. Look at the rainfall totals based on those two forecasts. For southeast Louisiana, we're looking at overall maybe 3 near 4 inches of rainfall. And what's interesting is that the GFS is going to continue to kind of decrease the amount of rain accumulation over the Houston area. I mentioned this before during our 8 a.m. newscast, that the models are going to be very, very weak in trying to forecast rainfall totals because overall for southeast Louisiana, we are not anticipating flooding rains on a wide scale. If we see some of those bands kind of set up over us, we could see some minor flooding based on the fact that the storms that develop over us can produce heavy amounts of rainfall, but that's typical of almost any thunderstorm in the summertime. And there's also the chance that if we see training, where the line of storms just continues to move over the same area, we could see some minor flooding from that as well. So overall, not anticipating widespread flooding. Localized flooding is still a possibility as we get into more next week. Another almost certain that we're going to see is coastal flooding. With those strong southeast and easterly winds, that piles up the water and the lakes and our eastern-facing shoreline, as well as along the Mississippi coast, and tides are going to be running at about 2 to 4 feet above normal. So areas outside of the levee protection system could certainly see some flooding. Heavy rains, again, we're saying, and based on the Weather Service numbers, about 5 to 10 inches. That isn't really necessarily widespread. That may be more localized areas. Over the course of this entire event, could see 5 to 10 inches. Again, our model's indicating 3, maybe 4 inches over 5 to 7 days. We can handle that amount of rainfall. Also the possibility of, as these storms move in, just the rotation of a hurricane or a tropical system lends itself on the northeastern and eastern quadrant of a storm to develop usually short-lived, weak tornadoes. So that may be something that we're keeping an eye on for next week if we see kind of those banding type storms move across southeast Louisiana into next week. This is a look at the water vapor, and there really isn't anything to show you in terms of any steering. There is a little bit of dry air, it appears, in North Texas. You see the panhandle, very dry air, and it looks like some of that may be trying to work its way toward Harvey. If that's the case, then that may help to speed up kind of the weakening process, which would be great news for the folks in Texas. But I'm going to show you our computer model that really kind of highlights why we're not looking at a whole lot of motion with Harvey. High pressure, or I should say an upper high, off to the west as well as to the east, and Harvey is kind of in between these two systems, so neither of those features really helping to steer Harvey. Models are also indicating now that an upper trough, and you see that diving out of the Great Lakes, it doesn't look like it's going to be far enough south to really pick Harvey up, which we were hoping would happen. Really hoping more for the Texas folks. Again, for direct impacts here in Louisiana, they're not looking too detrimental to us by any means. Harvey's going to continue to sit over southern Texas as we get into Thursday. Friday, still kind of meandering into South Texas, maybe northern Mexico before it starts to weaken. This upper air model is based on the GFS, and I was showing you the GFS model down at the surface. It kind of has Harvey weakening over South Texas and what is left of it moving toward northern Mexico. Actually, great news with the GFS is that it does keep Harvey farther and farther to our west, which, again, you don't want to be on the western side of this storm, but we're so far to the west that we're not going to see the heaviest of that rainfall over us. So great news, and we'll kind of recap here for you if you're just tuning in to Facebook and our social media post here, that the very latest on Harvey winds come down again at about 75 miles an hour. Pressure has come up, so it is still weakening, but it's going to maintain that strength of possibly tropical storm force for maybe the entire weekend. Models are indicating now by late Sunday into Monday, or I should say the Hurricane Center, by late Sunday into Monday, we ought to see this becoming more of a depression or a remnant low. However, that circulation is still going to be present in Texas through at least the middle to end of next week. So our rain chances here, starting associated with Harvey, starting really more so on Monday and continuing on through Thursday. For us, widespread flooding is not very likely. Localized flooding is certainly a potential. Normal circumstances, I wouldn't think we'd have any major issues, but because of the pumping situation in Orleans Parish, we could have some problems there. Elsewhere, I don't think it's really going to be that much of a huge concern. Of course, there's a lot of tropical moisture associated with Harvey, and that is going to be sent our way by next week. Monday, maybe late Sunday, starting into Monday through Thursday. Some of that, with a lot of ample moisture, could produce heavy downpours. We see that every summertime. Now, we may see more of those type of storms, and so that's why I'm saying localized flooding is definitely possible. If you're in an area that tends to flood, or if you're in an area that gets in on one of these heavier cells, or if we do see kind of those banding features setting up over parts of southeast Louisiana, if they set up over one particular region, we could see some minor flooding. And those type of bands, what's always interesting is you might have significant 5+ inches of rainfall from the band, and then on either side, east and west, by maybe only a dozen miles or so, you have almost nothing. So it'll be dependent on where, if we see any of those type of bands setting up, any individual heavy cells from storms that set up as well, that would kind of indicate to us that we could see some minor flooding. Mentioned before, the National Weather Service office in Slidell is indicating that they may issue a flash flood watch. That means conditions are favorable for it to happen, not that it is happening on Monday for the area, only because that's when we're looking at most of our rainfall to start moving into the area. But right now, today, and actually mostly dry day, we have some sunshine outside, and temperatures are beginning up to near 90 degrees. Today's rain chances at around a 40% shot. Tomorrow they'll pick up to around a 60% chance, but then by Monday and through most of next week, Monday through Thursday, definitely, about a 70 to 80% chance of rain. It's not going to be a constant rainfall. It's not the rain shield that you see associated with the center of Harvey. It'll be more on and off showers kind of moving through. And again, if we get enough breaks in the rainfall, hopefully flooding won't be too much of a concern. With it still relatively dry, especially today, somewhat tomorrow, make sure that you have storm drains clear. If you have a catch basin outside of your house, make sure it is clear of anything. Any debris that you see in the street or on your yard, get it out of the way. Make sure that the water, once it starts to fall over the course of next week, has somewhere to go. Cleaning leaves out of your gutters, just making sure that any debris that could possibly clog any of the drainage systems is gone. Now, I know some of the parishes as well as some of the municipalities, the cities, have started to try and do that as well and go through, but they may miss some. So good idea just to head out, make sure that those storm drains are clear so the water has somewhere to go. We'll get the new information. Well, actually, with it inland, we're actually going to get new coordinates every hour, and I will make sure that we're posting those on not only our WWL-TV Facebook page, Twitter as well, my own personal Facebook and Twitter pages, Instagram. We're going to be doing updates on social media as well. We're not going to do another extended cut-in until probably 1 o'clock, and then at 4 o'clock we'll have new coordinates as well as a new forecast to track. But based on computer models right now, I don't think that's going to change a great deal. Inland now, and it's just going to sit for the next several days. And again, I was talking about the fact that some models, and actually the current track from the Hurricane Center, I'm going to pop that back up there. I apologize for looking down here. I'm my own director punching up our weather sources. Notice that the Hurricane Center no longer brings that path of the center of the storm back out into open water. Again, I was talking about the fact that you really don't need to pay too much attention to that. If it does move out over open water, the water temperatures are now significantly cooler due to Harvey. So we're not going to see any kind of rapid intensification or much intensification at all, perhaps, if it were to move back over the coastal waters. And again, it looks like it's going to remain, whatever is left of Harvey, pretty far to the west of Louisiana, that we will see some rainfall, obviously, but nothing like the heavy rains that folks in eastern and even southwestern Louisiana will experience in southeast Louisiana. So we're looking in pretty good shape for right now. And I think we're going to be in pretty good shape for the rest of this week. Just be prepared for some, at times, heavy rainfall. Again, this weekend still relatively dry, especially today. A few more showers tomorrow. Then the real wet forecast, kind of a soggy stretch of weather, comes in for Monday and lasts till likely Thursday until whatever happens to Harvey happens. Again, the Euro kind of has it getting lifted up to our north. The GFS has it basically dissipating over South Texas, and remnants generally moving toward the west. But we'll continue to watch it here in the Pinpoint Forecast Center. But right now, things are looking pretty good for us, for Harvey. Folks in Texas, that is not the case. We'll see you back here on Facebook at 1 o'clock for an update. But as I mentioned, each hour we'll continue to post the new coordinates from Harvey, as well as any other information, satellite and radar data that we see coming into the Weather Center. For now, I'm Meteorologist Chris Franklin in the Pinpoint Forecast Center.